Here's Tom Trento.
Hey, we're back, okay, and we're back from our intermission. For those of you on the TrentoVision.tv side of the program, you will see, as we are speaking, you will see various pictures going up. We got to get some of our Mozart in there. We have a couple of guys working the gigantic directorial room. That's a Macintosh computer, putting stuff up, and we'll have some videos and slides and that now. But we're taking a break a couple of minutes before the top of the hour. Then we give you a little bit of news. We come back about 5 after. And our goal is to use a lot of that time in the future for your advertisements. We are now opening up the opportunity. Oh, my God. Oh, okay. Mike, you almost lost a computer there. We are now opening up the opportunity to give us a new computer. An opportunity to advertise with us. And if you're in the retail business, then and you are actually, you can be anywhere on the face of the earth because the signal's going all over. But the signal is broadcast from North Miami to Fort Pierce, and then out on the turnpike up to Kissimmee. So there's a lot of retail businesses. Typically, our kind of national security work attracts people in the gun business or something along those lines, gun store owners or military defense contractors. We deal with national security issues. But if you got a great restaurant you want people to know about, and you are supportive of, or you don't have to be supportive of our views to advertise. In fact, a lot of times people advertise because they're not, but it's a double good whammy for you. If you like what you're hearing and you want the show to continue the way it is, we'll help you generate business so that capitalism works, okay? You're with Tom Trento, CJ, Mark.
And our listeners would be very happy to know which auto body shops and which restaurants and which hairdressers
to go to, exactly.
They want to know where to go because they want to support the people
I'd move that computer over
who believe the same things they do. So think about it.
Yes, absolutely. And car dealerships, all of that. By the way, we're going to be cross-promoting both shows. Our show, the Drive Time Show in the afternoon drive, 3 to 6 p.m. every day. We'll watch the sun go down with you, but your spirits will elevate. We are here, Trento Vision, 3 to 6 on WNN on the radio side, 1470. But in the morning, you have to tune in to WNN 1470 and listen to Brian Craig and Steve Kane, our good friends. They're handling the cleaning of your brain at the beginning of the day, and then as you get contaminated by the mainstream. You guys are having a hard time over there.
You guys got your wires crossed, man. This is
Mike
painful
and
to
Mark,
watch.
It is really painful. You guys can't see it, but there's. Oh, that is going to get run over in a second. Okay.
Do not move your chair.
I don't understand what the hard thing is to. Anyway.
The thing is, Mark wanted to sit there today because he didn't want to be in the way when he has to get up and go out of the room.
You guys just do your job, I'll do mine, all right?
We can't watching you. It's like watching somebody on the Empire State Building walking on a beam, and you go, and you're supposed to be down washing your car. And the guy's going to fall off the beam. I got to watch this. So, but here we are every day. It's 75 degrees again today in this room in Boca Raton. But I'm going to tell you what it is outside, okay? It's warm outside. Let's see. I got that little thing there. I got text. It's 79 degrees outside. So it's actually cooler in here, which it's supposed to be if you're inside a building. All right, it's Veterans Day, the 12th of November. And we have a fascinating segment. Is Rich on the line yet?
Yes, he is.
He is. We're going to bring him in a minute. Let me just lay a little precedent here for our viewers on TrentoVision.tv and our listeners. Call your friends up. We now have, in about 4 or 5 minutes, we're going to bring on Lieutenant Colonel Rich Swire, good friend of ours, retired Army. He was in for 96 years. He was in the Army for, he's 146, and he will be on the show. still fighting. He eats nails for breakfast, and he runs 400 miles a day. The guy's amazing. He simply is. He was very involved in helping us start and maintain the Florida Security Council, then the United West, and central figure in that effort, fighting the jihadis with us. And he's a prolific writer, writing now for a great publication called WatchdogWire.com. WatchdogWire.com. We've done some quite a bit of work with those folks, great folks. Today is Armistice Day. Truly recognized until 1919 in the United States of America. I just want to show you the interesting history of this day, Armistice Day, which eventually was renamed to Veterans Day. But it was identified in 1926 as the end of the war on 11/11/1918. The U.S. recognized that day, November 11th, 1918, as the end of World War I, and a recognition to honor all the, and an armistice is a peace treaty, basically, to recognize that First World War devastated the globe in many respects, and that the end of that would herald in a new time of peace and security for the globe, because nobody wants to go back to that type of catastrophic war. So in 1926, the United States recognized Armistice Day, and then in 1938, it was changed to Veterans Day. Actually, in 1954, it was changed to Veterans Day. And then in June of 1968, some brilliant bureaucrat had an idea. Let's give everybody 3-day holidays. Saturday, Sunday, Monday. So if you remember, back in 1968, 4 official holidays in the United States were classified differently than their numerical day to the corresponding Monday.
You might be the only one here who remembers that, Tom.
I remember it because I'm reading about it. And what were the 4 holidays? Anybody know the 4 days that are now celebrated on Mondays? Washington's birthday. Remember, it used to be like was a particular day. Now it's...
Don't they call it President's Day now?
Well, yeah, now it's formally on a Monday. And then there was Memorial Day. Memorial Day was changed to a Monday, the last Monday in May.
Columbus Day?
Columbus Day was changed to a Monday. And Veterans Day was changed to a Monday. They moved it away from the numerical day, November 11th, to a Monday. That was in 1968. Well, everybody said, screw you, Washington. We're not changing 11/11. There's significance in 11/11. So nobody followed it. Very few of the states followed it. And then in 1971, there was complete confusion because it was celebrated on October 25th, Monday, October 25th. And everybody said, this is crazy. So in September of 1975, President Ford returns November 11th to...
November 11th?
Yeah. He returns Veterans Day to November 11th, took it away from being a Monday somewhere floating between October and November. So today is the day where we recognize not the dead. That really isn't the purpose of this day, as we all know.
Right.
When do we observe the memorial of those who have died fighting for the country?
On Memorial Day.
What a good idea.
Yes.
Veterans Day is to honor all veterans, inclusive of those who have given their all, but primarily those who are still active duty, those who are retired, like Lieutenant Colonel Rich Swire. And it's sort of a symbolic day for those considering joining the great U.S. military, to see that there's a long line of recognition of their work and they're not forgotten. But sadly, folks, today it's a little different. We believe that this military has suffered immensely in its vision as to what it is, in its operational capabilities as to what it does, and into its essence, down to the grunt level, as to why they fight. Thus, we named today's show, essentially through an email and through the title we have here, Hey Sarge, why should I fight for President Obama? We're going to get answers from our good friend, Lieutenant Colonel Richard Swire, right now. Dr. Richard Swire, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Hi, Rich.
You hear me? And I hope I want to wish everybody a wonderful Veterans Day. And I also want to say that I do not run 400 miles a day. I only run 200 miles a day.
Oh, okay.
But you sound great for 146, and you look good too.
Yes, I'm 147 today, so I want everybody to wish me a happy birthday.
But you were born on Veterans Day, though. And
absolutely.
Right.
No, I want to wish this nation and all of our veterans a very wonderful and safe Veterans Day, and I thank you for having me on your show, and thank you for putting up the Watchdog Wire logo constantly on your Trento Vision. I really appreciate that.
We knew that little touch would just tickle you to death.
Why don't you...
Absolutely. And my picture with watchdogwire.com, Dr. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's a good picture. Who is that guy?
Hey.
I told you look good.
Hey.
Yeah,
There he goes.
It's not me, but anyway.
Let's do this. Hey, Rich, let's do this. Let's establish, for the sake of our viewers on TrentoVision.tv and our listeners on WNN 1470, and we have them all over the place. They're in Europe, they're in Israel, they're in the United States, they're in Canada, they're all over the place. Let's establish your creds, okay? Some of your military background, your credibility, because the information you have for us today is extremely disturbing. And we want to make sure people don't look at you like some whack job, you don't know what you're talking about. Tell us a little bit about your military background.
Well, again, like my good friend Alan West, I spent 23 years in the Army. Like Alan, I'm an field artillery officer. Like Alan, I am an airborne qualified soldier. And like Alan, I am a combat veteran. Unlike Alan, he served in Iraq. I served in Vietnam. With the 101st Airborne Division. I was a forward observer, served there, and fought during Tet of '68, which is considered by many the major battle that occurred throughout the Vietnam War was during Tet of '68. I held a number of command and staff positions. I have attended the Field Artillery Officers Basic and Advanced course in the Command and General Staff College. My last job was the Deputy Inspector General for Pacific Command, but I also served in as the adjutant of the 7th Special Forces Group, and when I was at the Training and Doctrine Command, I was responsible for all the anti-terrorism and terrorism counteraction doctrine for the United States Army. Other than that, I'm sort of a ho-hum guy.
Another low achiever guest on the Tom Trento show.
That's right. I'm one of those, has-been, guys that Tom calls up whenever he needs somebody to fill in the blank.
Yeah, right. And another fascinating point about you is that you were stationed just outside of Munich in 1972 when the Palestinians killed on Black September?
Yes, Black September. I was actually, my unit was called in after that horrific murdering of 11 Israeli athletes and killing of one German police officer. My unit was called in afterwards to provide additional security for Olympic villages, and I learned a very harsh lesson on that day that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
And all of this is by way of precedent, ladies and gents, on TrentoVision.tv and on our radio side, WNN 1470, 20 minutes past the top of the hour. We're setting a precedent for some disturbing material. And our guest, Dr. Rich Swire, was also involved with the Reagan administration coming up with the doctrine on terrorism. What was that doctrine all about, Rich?
Well, the doctrine, I sat on a presidential committee to create the policy, which was eventually adopted by President Reagan, that the United States would not negotiate with terrorists. And, of course, we knew that terrorists were using all kinds of nefarious means to try and create havoc, not only around the globe, but also to try to hold people hostage and get their way. And so we created the doctrine. And I will tell you that today we do not negotiate with terrorists. We actually give them full United States rights under the 5th and 14th Amendment of the Constitution, and we lawyer them up. We give them 3 hots in a cot and a public forum to talk about
3 hots in a cot.
Yep. Unbelievable.
Well, it is, and I would have never believed as an officer in the United States military that I would ever see this day, and I shed tears for the men and women who are serving today, having to live under that kind of a system, and it's really terrible because what's happened since I left the military in 1990 is that the military has fundamentally changed. And I believe after we talk about it a little bit, I'll leave it up to the people to whether or not your listeners and your viewers, whether or not it's changed for the better or for the worse.
All right, and what we're going to do for the viewers and listeners, we're going to walk through with Rich a PowerPoint. Did you put this PowerPoint together?
Yes, and I made this actual presentation to a variety of groups, and of course I'm more than happy to come to groups and give the presentation and answer questions. So hopefully if someone has a question, they'll call into the show, and I'd be more than happy to answer the question because I think it's important for us to understand what is truly going on with our military.
Yeah. 565-1470. 888 if you're driving in your car. 565-1470. If you're watching us on TrentoVision.tv on your computer or your iPhone, it's right above the window, folks. Look at where you're looking at the microphone now, and right above that, 888-565-1470, because we get people all the time going, I'm watching you, but I don't know your number. It's right on top of the screen. Window, okay? It's right there. It's on the screen now. There it is, right on the screen. But I can't see it. Okay, so anyway, Rich, we're going to hand it over to you, and for our viewers, you're gonna see a phenomenal PowerPoint. And for our listeners, when you get home tonight, you go to TrentoVision.tv, you hit the archive, and you can watch the PowerPoint. You can speed forward on the software there. We got everything going on here. So, but all of that to say, on this Veterans Day, we would all love to be cheering like we were on 9/12/2001, where America was united and we saw black and white, good and evil. The world has become so confused from a military point of view in regard to the U.S. over the past 3 years that we need people like Dr. Rich Swire who are out there doing this. And Rich is a tremendous advocate. He's one of the leaders in the state for
and it's fundamentally changed, and that fundamental change began in the 1990s. There's 3 things I'm going to kind of talk about that kind of explain how this military has changed so dramatically. The first is we've taken our fighting force, we've taken our military, and rather than having them be fighters and warriors, they are now, quote, a force for peace. And you may have seen advertisements, particularly for the Navy, where you see this wonderful, magnificent aircraft carrier from above, and it says, we're a force for good. Well, guess what? That is what endemic of what has happened to our military. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about the rules of engagement and then how they alter our ability for our soldiers to defend themselves. And then the last thing I'll talk a little bit about is this idea of mandated defense cuts, which is called sequestration, and its impact on Florida. And, of course, in Florida we have 21 military bases and 1.68 million veterans. So we'll go to the next slide, and this is where I want to kind of talk about something that's very important for everybody, is that what is our soldiers saying? I think it's important, first of all, to understand what do our soldiers say. And every year, the United States Army does a leadership survey, and they've done this for decades and decades and decades. They released the latest results and findings of their leadership survey in July of this year. And what is striking about the survey is 74%, almost three-quarters of our active Army leaders, from sergeant to colonel, believe the United States Army is headed in the wrong direction and that the United States Army is not prepared for the challenges of the next decade.
What was the percentage, Rich? Say that again.
74% of our sergeants through the rank of colonel believe the Army is headed in the wrong direction and that the Army is not prepared for the challenges of the next decade.
Okay.
Now, there's two reasons for that, in the survey. The first is the Army's plans to shrink the force. And that's not only the Army that's going to shrink, but it's going to be the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines, and the Coast Guard men and women. But it's also political correctness, particularly among the leaders, the general officers and above, our National Command Authority, which includes the President, the Secretary of Defense, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and the chiefs of all of the services. They are become politically correct, which is dangerous to our military. Now let's talk about the fundamental changes. There's a great book that was actually written by some wonderful. Well, let me just go back. How did this all begin? It really began on May the 3rd, 1994. Do you remember where you were on May the 3rd, 1994? Well, on that day, President Bill Clinton signed a presidential decision directive. And that directive said, our military is now a fighting force to a multilateral peacekeeping force. It went from a fighting force to a multilateral peacekeeping force. Can anybody say nation building? That's where it began under Bill Clinton. What's interesting is over the last 2 decades, since I've been out of the military, there's been an unparalleled change in the military to systematically erode it by, according to Colonel Michael Steele, by the way, Colonel Michael Steele was a company commander in the 3rd Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment during the Somalia operation, Gothic Serpent, which is based on the famous book and now movie Black Hawk Down. He said that, quote, over the last 2 decades, that's Colonel Michael Steele, United States Army retired, over the last 2 decades, the unparalleled military of the 1980s has been systematically eroded by an incessant wave of politically influenced thought on how we should wage war. There's a wonderful book out there called Fighting Today's Wars, written by 2 retired Army colonels, both of them JAG officers, in other words, legal officers for the United States military. One of them, actually, one of the colonels was the legal advisor to the United States Army Delta Force. And he said, when he wrote this in the book, he said the book Fighting Today's Wars is a startling look at this insidious slide of our armed forces from a position of readiness to a position of timidity and avoidance, unquote. That's a very sad situation, but we're seeing it.
Yeah, Rich, this is Tom. I read that book, and it was hard to put that book down, Fighting Today's Wars.
Yes, and if you get a chance to go on and if you happen to be by a computer, it's called Fighting Today's Wars, How Americans' Leaders Have Failed Our Warriors. And it's it's written by Colonel retired David G. Bolgiano, I guess that's right, and Colonel retired James A. Patterson. An excellent book. I commend it to not only those veterans that may be listening, but to anyone who cares about this national security of this nation. They should certainly read that book.
All right, we're at the bottom of the hour, folks, on TrentoVision.tv. With the vision part of our communication coming out of Beasley Broadcasting here in Boca Raton. And on the radio side, it's WNN 1470. It is Veterans Day in the United States of America. Actually, the day was yesterday. We're celebrating it today on Monday. It's the holiday on Monday. And instead of the typical rah, rah, rah stuff about veterans, we're taking a seriously hard look at this administration led by President Obama as the commander-in-chief. Hey, I killed bin Laden, and, what else you want, guys? We're taking a hard look at his philosophical and ideological understanding of what a military is. And we have Lieutenant Colonel Rich Swire, our good friend, doing a fascinating presentation on the demise of the U.S. military in light of the objectives in the next decade. But Rich went back to 1994, the Clinton administration, and said that a fundamental shift took place in the philosophy, from the administration's point of view, of the purpose of the military, from a fighting force to a more diplomatic or hearts and minds kinds of force. And our friend Aaron Klein is doing a lot of writing about this also. But Rich, tell the people, why did Clinton make that type of decision? I know he was experiencing the peace dividend, and the budget was increasing in the United States, and he wanted to go out and build and help everybody all over the world. Why the shift at that time?
Well, I think the shift at that time was created because it's a philosophical one. It's actually was created by, and it's actually been driven even more today than before by a group called the Center for American Progress, John Podesta's group, and a group called the Institute for Policy Studies. These are two liberal, left-leaning think tanks, and they decided that the way you change the military is you change its mission from one of war fighting to one of peacekeeping. And you reduce it in size and capability so that it doesn't fight wars. It can't fight wars. Rather, all it can do is go to the rescue of people who might be in dire need, like people who might be hurt by a tsunami. And so you send an aircraft carrier group not to go after the bad guys, but you use the military for what it's not. You literally turn our military from cutting edge war fighters and warriors into farmers who are pushing a plow to help people. It's not the role of the military to build schools. When I grew up in the military and when I was trained in the military, my job as a field artillery officer in support of an infantry company and the company commander was to close with and destroy the enemy using all means available. Today, that's not true. And actually what's happened, and you mentioned Aaron Klein, there's a great book done by Aaron Klein and Brenda J. Elliott called Fool Me Twice, and it talks about the greening of America, which is actually one of my slides. And it says, in chapter 1 of the book, it says, quote, and this is, again, Aaron Klein and Brenda J. Elliott in the book Fool Me Twice, quote, imagine the fundamental transformation of the U.S. Armed Forces into a social work organization designated to combat global warming, fight global poverty, remedy injustice, bolster the United Nations, and increase peacekeeping forces worldwide. Well, I would submit to you, Tom, and your listeners and your viewers, that has happened. We have changed, fundamentally transformed our United States military forces away from being a fighting force into now being a force for good. And that does not make any sense for me, and it also does not make any sense to our soldiers who are on the front lines. And I will explain why, because that translates into rules of engagement.
Hang on, Rich. We got a couple of questions for you. And if anybody wants to get in on the questions for Dr. Rich Swire as he's analyzing the demise of the United States military starting in 1994. So I'm very curious as you work through the Bush years, where it went, and then into the Obama years. And folks, we'll be here for the next 500 hours, okay? We have a 4-day seminar we're presenting to you. But CJ, you had a question.
We're staying on the air the whole time.
It's a marathon!
They were in the vigil at the Supervisor of Election office in St. Lucie County, which, by the way, starts tonight at about 6 o'clock. And the address for that is 4132 Okeechobee Road in Fort Pierce, 34947. It's a candlelight vigil to make sure that all the votes get counted in St. Lucie County. If you're in the area, please stop by there and show your nonpartisan support. No, don't bring your candidate signs or your campaign T-shirts. Just show your support for the Constitution and getting the votes counted.
Amen. Amen.
Right.
Amen. And I that's fundamental. That's fundamental to America. And that's what I fought for, and all of our veterans and many of my comrades died for, is to ensure we have free and fair elections throughout the United States of America, and that's critical and fundamental to our freedom.
Absolutely.
All right, let's have your next slide. What's the next slide, Rich?
All right, well, let's talk a little bit about the rules of engagement, because I think this is very important. And again, if you go back to the book, Fighting Today's Wars, and I've confirmed this, every time, and I want to give this quote, every time a soldier fires a weapon in Iraq or Afghanistan, there's an investigation. I happen to be in Nashville, Tennessee in August for the 70th anniversary of the creation of the 101st Airborne Division. And I talked with a number of soldiers, I talked with a number of officers, and I talked with particularly a fellow artilleryman, a young major. And he said, "Sir, every time I fire, as an artilleryman, every time I fire a round in support of our soldiers, I'm investigated." Now, the problem with that is that our soldiers have a right to defend themselves. If you take away the right of the soldier to defend him or herself, you are in fact violating the social contract between the United States government and our volunteer citizen soldiers. And at the individual level, it means that their lives are put in danger. And I will give you some quick examples, and I think you've already had Billy and Karen Vaughn on, and you explained to people how, we overstressed our special operators on August the 6th, approximate cause, I believe, of what happened on August the 6th, 2011, with the death of Aaron and many of the other 21 SEALs and a total of 38 people, is a result of this concept that there's timidity in the chain of command, and they will not fire even though they know there's an enemy, a bad guy on the ground getting ready to shoot at you. They will stop the firing in order to protect the enemy and put our soldiers at risk. And in that case, we lost 22 of our best Navy SEALs, including the crew, National Guard men and women, and some of our Afghan allies. And that same philosophy, I believe, you saw play out in Benghazi, where people were told to stand down. Standing down is the same thing as timidity in our chain of command and the willingness not to fire on the bad guys and allow our people to die. And as a matter of fact, in the book, Fighting Today's Wars, the authors warn, quote, morphing the U.S. military from a war-fighting entity into a diplomatic corps focused on nation building, that is a dangerous situation for men and women in uniform, and I don't care what branch of service. And I will tell you that when I was coming back from that, I happened to meet in an airport in Atlanta, and a retired Navy guy who was working as a defense contractor in Afghanistan, and he told me that he was at one of the air bases in Afghanistan, I won't mention which one, and they were being attacked. They were getting mortar fire, and they were literally having an attack against people were attacking them. They were running up and shooting at them and all that. And 2 armed helicopters were launched. And those armed helicopters had to request 10 times They had to send 10 requests before they were allowed to fire on the people attacking our own soldiers. To me, that's not something that our soldiers... Why would you want to fight? Why would you want to serve when you know you're put in that kind of a situation, Tom?
Let me... Can I ask you... I just have a quick question, Rich, and also I want to give out the number for the listeners who have questions for you. I'm sure some people do. It's 888-565-1470. That's 1-888-565-1470 if you have a question for Dr. Rich. My question is this: why are we so concerned about investigating our own soldiers defending themselves and our country, and yet when it comes to an incident like Fort Hood, we're not willing to investigate that soldier who fired a weapon and find out what happened there, are we?
Well, and I think that goes back to what our Army soldiers are saying is called political correctness. And political correctness, another words for political correctness is appeasement. And we know that appeasement does not work. We know that when you appease the enemy, when you care more about the enemy than you care about your own soldiers, that's a cocktail, a mix for disaster. And that's what we saw at Fort Hood, Texas. Rather than calling it out for what it is, they called it workplace environment, workplace violence. And that's the sadness of the whole situation.
Yeah.
And our soldiers see this. They're not dumb. They know that if they fire their weapon, they're more than likely, particularly our officers, our young officers and our sergeants, who are getting... Look, when I was in Vietnam, and my company, and we were under fire, we were being fired upon, when my company commander turned to me and said, I want you to bring all fire available on that point or that place, no one in the chain of command ever questioned it. Now, if I did something wrong, if the company commander did something wrong or I did something wrong and something happened that was wrong, that would be determined after the fact, not before. Nobody would second guess.
Right, during an attack.
Commander who is under fire, they would never second guess his or her decision because it's a social contract. We have a right as soldiers to defend ourselves. And as citizens, we have a right to defend ourselves. That's why we have the Second Amendment. And if you get, I mean, it would be like to have this situation occur. Think about this. Benghazi, the stand-down order, and the whole idea that we didn't have enough information to make a decision. Well, that's why you need the people on the ground.
Right.
Okay,
we had to make sure it was all clear before we would send anyone in.
And say, I have a robber coming into my house. I don't expect the police to say, well, gee, we don't have enough information to make a decision on whether or not to send a police car. Or if I say my house is burning down, and the fire department says, excuse me, I don't really have enough information to determine whether or not your house is burning down. It's the same concept. It's the man or woman on the ground that calls the shot. And the chain of command is supposed to be designed to support that person. Now, if that person on the ground called the wrong shot, you find out about that afterwards, not beforehand. And that's the issue, I think.
Wow. We're 44 minutes past the hour with Rich Swire, retired Lieutenant Colonel, United States Army. And here on Veterans Day 2012, November 12th, we're discussing whether or not it makes sense for a soldier today to fight for President Obama, the Commander-in-Chief. So, Rich, we got about a few more minutes left. We're going to have to get the rest of your PowerPoint on another show, but we have some key questions for you. Because the issue we're struggling with today is, you know, who does the soldier fight for? Is the soldier fighting for the Commander-in-Chief? Is the soldier fighting for the flag? Is the soldier... What Mark has a question right there. You need your microphone there.
Yeah, I just want to go back to the to the oath of office. I thought it was quite interesting. I just revisiting that from the past. And go ahead, Tom. I want to pull it up.
You're pulling that
Yeah,
up?
I want to
I
pull
have
it
a
up.
question. I have a question.
Well, let me phrase it to you, Rich. Then you throw in what you have, CJ, and then Rich can answer it. Question is, I know we all say, oh, you fight for your country and all of that, but does this president, from your point of view, and it's a rhetorical question. Don't answer it yet. We're going to let CJ jump in, and then Mark jumps in, and then you can make sense out of all of this.
Yeah.
Do you think there's any hesitancy now on soldiers wanting to fight for this president as he leads us to build up countries, Muslim countries, so that they can more effectively try to defeat the United States, Israel, and the West? CJ, what was your thought?
Yeah, well, I think you're absolutely correct with that. I have nephews who are getting to be the age where they can join the military, and I would have to tell them, no, don't do it.
I could not tell anybody to
Okay.
go into the military right now.
I would
cannot
have
do
to
that.
say
I can't even
absolutely
believe I would
no.
say that.
I admire you for wanting to do it, but I can't let you do it because you will never be allowed to defend yourself. You will never actually be allowed to defend the ideals of this country, which is the purpose for joining the military to begin with. And I have to say absolutely not. If you need help paying for college, I'll help you pay for college, but don't join the Army to do it.
Well,
Mark.
I got a question. It goes back to the oath of office, and I want to pull it up and get it exactly right. It goes, I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will be true faith and allegiance to the same. And this is the enlisted part. And I will obey the orders of the President of the United States and the orders of the officers over me, according to the regulations of the Uniform Code of Military Justice, so help me God. Now, what happens, Doc, when I say when an officer or president fails to follow his obligations in accordance to the regulations of the Uniform Code of Military Justice? What is an enlisted person supposed to do in that case? And in the case of an officer, they're just required to follow. Their oath is simply to swear to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I bear true faith and allegiance to the same, and obey. And that is their primary objective, is to the Constitution. What happens when an officer or a president fails to follow the Uniform Code of Military Justice?
Well, I think it is the responsibility of any officer and at the same time any enlisted man to refuse to follow an illegal order. And I think that what you saw in Benghazi when literally the SEALs decided they were not going to follow the stand-down order and gave their lives, that is the American soldier. That is the warrior ethos. That is why we have a military. And if we tell those people not to do it, even stand down in my mind is an illegal order. When my soldiers are under fire, if I'm told to stand down and not fire, that's an illegal order. I will take the court-martial and save the soldier. That's the idea. If you, as an enlisted man, can't trust your commander, whether it's a captain, a major, a lieutenant colonel, or a general, to allow you to do your job, if you can't do your job, then why do I want the job? Why am I there? Why should I be there? Why should I be in combat if you're not going to let me do the job? And I think that's the lesson, the sad lesson on this Veterans Day, that is there. It's real. It's killing our soldiers. It's killing our sailors. It's killing our airmen. It's killing our Marines. And it's killing our Coast Guard men and women. And I never thought I would say that on a Veterans Day, but it's true.
Well, let's see what Robert thinks, Rich. We have a caller, Robert. I think he was on the other day. I think, Robert, are you the Lieutenant Colonel, retired also?
That's correct. Thank you very much.
Sure. I'd like to introduce you to Rich Swire. Rich, Robert.
Yeah, thank you for your service, Colonel.
Got some questions for you.
Sure.
Decline of the military, you say, since 1994. From 2000 to 2008, we had George Bush Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, Senator Warner, Senator Graham, Paul Wolfowitz, John McCain, and Colin Powell. Now, do they bear responsibility for this decline?
I'm sorry, I missed that last point. Are you complaining because we had a different commander-in-chief and a different chain of command, and they allowed our soldiers to do their job? You're complaining about that? Is that the point?
No, I'm not complaining. I'm asking if in the decline was there an interim in which suddenly we got better, because from 2000 to 2008, we got back to what you say is our mission, and then from 2008 to the present, we suddenly fallen back to 1994 to 2000. I mean,
that's correct, because we've had a change in leadership at the National Command Authority level. And when you have a change in leadership at the National Command Authority level, they determine the rules of engagement. It's the President of the United States, through his Secretary of Defense and through the Chairman of through the Joint Chiefs and the individual secretaries to the different Navy, Army, Air Force, Marine, and so on. They determine the rules of engagement, and those rules of engagement have changed, and our soldiers are now at risk. Under the previous administration, they were not at risk because they were allowed to do their job. That doesn't mean you go out and kill innocents. That's still against the law. That's still against the Uniform Code of Military Justice. But you're allowed to defend yourself. You're allowed to defend yourself. Right now, we have more United States military actually being tried than terrorists today under this administration.
Gosh.
May I respond?
Sure, yeah, go ahead, Robert. Yes.
Okay, so what you're telling me is from 1994 to 2000, we declined. From 2000...
Well, we didn't fight a war between 1994 and 2000, other than the one that Bill Clinton called in Bosnia, which was actually fought from 10,000 feet. There's a difference from fighting a war at 10,000 feet and having boots on the ground and actually seeing men and women killed on the ground, fighting hand-to-hand or within rifle range. There's a difference between that. So I don't think you can look at the philosophy in 1994 was forgotten about after 9/11 until the new president took over and this current president took over.
All right, hang on, everybody, hang on. Robert, this is Tom again, and thanks for calling in. Where did Rich? Robert is a friend of the show, and he's I guess you're a Democrat, but are you a Democrat, Robert? Yeah, you are, right? We discussed that the other day.
100%.
Okay. Where did you serve? When you served, you did your 20-something years. Where did you serve?
Okay, I graduated from Fordham University, went into the military, served from the year 1959 to 1980. I had 3 tours in Vietnam, served in the 7th Special Forces, the 101st Airborne Division, the 82nd Airborne Division, the 173rd. I was in Vietnam from as Special Forces in 1963, went from Korea to Vietnam, 1965-66, and then was also there in 1969. I retired as a lieutenant colonel with the opportunity of having a battalion command, which I was declined.
And any time during your service, when you were in contact with the enemy, were you ever denied fire by a higher headquarters because you were more concerned about what happened to the enemy than what happened to your own soldiers?
Of course not.
Well, that's what's happening today in Afghanistan.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Colonel, and God bless you.
God bless you.
Okay, on that note, we are out of time, and this was getting very interesting, this conversation.
Can Rich stay for the little bridge time?
Yeah, can you hang on a little bit, Rich?
I appreciate the offer, CJ, but I got to cook dinner for my wife.
Oh, the big tough Army guy. We know who the boss is.
I'm going to start the barbecue.
Are you going to?
We know who the boss is. We know who the boss is.
Yes, from God to my wife to me.
Okay, there it goes. All right, we got to wind
well,
it down.
there's a
Mark.
chain of command you still have to follow, right? Even when you retire.
All right, Mark, you got 10 seconds.
Yeah, hey, Rich, I got a quick question for you.
Says jump.
We don't have a question. We can't.
Well, he answered yes. Hey, Rich, did that oath of office you took ever expire when you left the military?
No, it only expires when I expire.
All right. And on
then
that
don't
note,
do it.
On that note, we have to expire for this hour, and we'll be back in about 6 or 7 minutes. Thank you.
God bless God.
The war had been gone for 2 years, and I got the calling. I got the calling to join the service and support the boys over there.
Thousands of American troops have come home from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, suffering the effects of post-traumatic stress and traumatic brain injuries.
I never thought that